Get on the ground now. Officer Ryan Keller slammed Elijah Brooks face first against the polished airport floor hard enough to send a rolling suitcase spinning across gate C-12. Gasps ripped through the terminal. A child started crying. Phones lifted instantly into the air. Coffee splashed across Elijah's gray coat while boarding announcements echoed overhead like nothing had happened. "Sir, I did not resist you," Elijah said calmly, one cheek pressed against cold marble. His voice stayed low. Steady. That only seemed to irritate Keller more. "You fit the description," Keller snapped. "And now you are refusing lawful commands." He drove a knee into Elijah's shoulder as TSA travelers stopped in clusters around the gate. Some stared. Some whispered. Some quietly recorded. Elijah's leather case had burst open beside him. Papers slid halfway out. A worn photograph peeked from between thick legal folders. Keller noticed it and kicked the case farther away with his boot. "Do not touch that," Elijah said quickly. For the first time, strain cracked through his calm. Keller smirked. "Funny. That sounds like guilt to me." The airport lights reflected sharply off Keller's badge and body cam while Elijah lay in a wrinkled coat with tired shoes and trembling fingers curled against the floor. The contrast was brutal. Authority towering over dignity. "Sir, maybe we should verify first," TSA Supervisor Linda Morales said carefully from behind the security desk. Keller cut her off immediately. "I know exactly what I am looking at." He pointed toward Elijah without even facing him. Older black male. Suspicious behavior. Refusing commands. Carrying restricted documents. A man near the charging station muttered, "He should have just cooperated." Another traveler quietly nodded. Elijah closed his eyes for 1 second. Then he slowly sat up despite Keller's grip tightening on his arm. "Under federal procedure," Elijah said softly, "you need articulable cause before searching private legal materials." Keller laughed loudly enough for the surrounding crowd to hear. "Listen to this guy." A few nervous chuckles spread through the gate area. Everybody becomes a lawyer once cuffs come out. Elijah looked directly at Keller for the first time. His eyes were tired, but sharp. "No," he said. "Not everybody." Silence flickered for half a breath. Then Keller grabbed the leather case and yanked it open wider. "You think fancy words scare me?" Papers shifted under the harsh terminal lights. Dense legal notes. Highlighted case numbers. Federal seals partially hidden beneath folders. Keller frowned for a split second before covering it with arrogance again. "What is this?" Elijah's jaw tightened. "Confidential review documents." "That is not your decision to make." Keller turned toward the crowd like a man performing for an audience. "This is exactly how people hide things in plain sight." More phones lifted. Someone whispered, "Is he getting arrested?" A teenage boy standing near the window watched Elijah carefully instead of Keller. His name tag from a nearby school debate tournament hung crooked around his neck. Elijah noticed him staring. The boy did not look afraid. He looked confused. Morales stepped closer again. "Officer Keller, airport cameras already caught the takedown. Maybe we slow this down." Keller's expression hardened instantly. "Are you questioning my judgment?" Morales stopped talking. The room shrank back into silence. Elijah slowly adjusted his glasses with cuffed hands. His breathing was controlled, but one hand trembled badly near the old photograph sticking halfway out of the case. In the picture, a younger Elijah stood beside another black man in a courthouse hallway. The edges were worn almost white from years of folding. Keller snatched it up. "Who is this?" Elijah's eyes sharpened immediately. "Put that down." "Why?" "Somebody important." Keller mocked. "Your lawyer. Your parole officer." A few people looked uncomfortable now. The teenage boy near the window quietly lowered his phone. Elijah stood straighter despite the humiliation burning around him. "You should stop now," he said. Calm. Certain. Keller stepped closer until they were inches apart. "You are in no position to warn anybody." He turned to another airport officer. "Run his name again." "Full federal check this time." Morales looked at the screen. "System is taking longer than normal." Keller scoffed. "Because people like him always have a story." Elijah stared at the body cam clipped to Keller's chest. "Keep recording," he said quietly. Keller smirked. "Trust me. I plan to." The overhead boarding call continued in the background while the crowd leaned closer. Travelers missed flights just to watch. One woman whispered, "This is going viral tonight." Another replied, "Airport police do not tackle people for nothing." Elijah heard every word. He bent carefully and reached for the leather case again, but Keller shoved him backward toward a row of terminal seats. "Do not move." Papers scattered farther across the floor. One folder cracked open completely. A silver federal credential slid halfway out before stopping beneath the edge of a chair. The teenage boy saw it first. His eyes widened. Before he could speak, Keller barked toward security, "Take him to the holding room." Two officers stepped forward. Elijah looked once toward the hidden credential beneath the chair. Then toward Morales at the terminal screen. Her expression had suddenly changed. The system beside her flashed yellow. Restricted judicial access pending verification. Keller had not seen it yet. But Morales had. And so had someone walking fast toward gate C-12 from the far end of the terminal. The terminal doors slammed shut behind Elijah Brooks with a hollow metallic echo that stayed in his chest long after the crowd disappeared behind glass. He sat alone in the airport holding room beneath cold fluorescent lights while muffled voices drifted through the hallway outside. Somewhere nearby, someone was still replaying the video. He could hear his own body hitting the marble floor through a stranger's phone speaker. "Get on the ground now. You fit the description. People like him always have a story." Elijah lowered his eyes. One cuff still circled his wrist. His leather case rested on the table in front of him, scuffed and half open, papers bent at the corners from Keller's hands. Slowly, carefully, Elijah reached inside and straightened the old photograph that had nearly torn during the struggle. The younger man beside him in the picture wore courthouse robes and a tired smile. Elijah stared at it for several quiet seconds before slipping it back between legal folders marked with faded tabs and handwritten notes. His hands shook harder now that nobody was watching. A knock came softly at the holding room door. TSA Supervisor Linda Morales stepped inside carrying a paper cup of coffee. "You did not drink anything after the takedown," she said quietly. Elijah accepted the cup with both hands. "Thank you." Morales hesitated near the door. "Officer Keller says your documents are under investigation." Elijah gave a faint nod like he had heard worse before. That word gets used very easily these days. Morales glanced toward the leather case. "The system flagged restricted judicial clearance when they ran your name." Elijah did not answer immediately. Instead, he carefully closed the case. Systems make mistakes too. But his eyes shifted away when he said it. Morales noticed. So did the young airport clerk standing behind her. The boy from gate C-12. His debate badge still hung around his neck. "Sir," the boy asked carefully, "why did you tell him to keep recording?" Elijah looked at him for a long moment. "Because truth survives longer than noise." The boy fell silent. Outside the room, raised voices echoed again. "Keller." Angry. Fast footsteps followed. Morales lowered her voice immediately. "The airport director wants this contained before the media gets involved." Elijah almost smiled at that. Almost. Too late. Hours earlier, before the airport chaos, Elijah had been sitting alone in a tiny apartment on the edge of Baltimore with a bowl of untouched soup growing cold beside him. Rain tapped softly against the kitchen window while stacks of legal folders covered half the table. Prescription bottles lined the counter beside unopened mail stamped final notice. One envelope had already been folded 3 times to hide the overdue amount. A voicemail blinked on his old phone. "Dad," a young woman's voice said weakly through static. "The doctor said they moved my surgery date again. Call me when you land." Elijah replayed the message twice without speaking. Then he reached for the worn photograph again. Same courthouse hallway. Same man beside him. Same quiet grief in his eyes. Beneath the photo sat a federal law handbook filled with handwritten notes in the margins. Precise corrections. Procedure references. Court review annotations. The work of someone who understood the system far deeper than ordinary travelers ever would. But the apartment itself told a different story. Peeling paint. Faded coat hanging by the door. Cheap medication beside unpaid bills. Silence heavy enough to hear the refrigerator hum. Elijah folded the photo carefully and slipped it inside the leather case before leaving for the airport. Back in the holding room, Keller's voice suddenly exploded through the hallway outside. "I do not care what the computer says." He resisted an officer. Morales stiffened. The young clerk looked nervous now. Elijah remained seated. Calm. Tired. One of the legal folders shifted slightly as he moved, exposing the corner of a silver federal credential hidden beneath paperwork. The boy saw it again. His eyes widened. Elijah closed the folder immediately. "Sir," the boy whispered, "are you some kind of—" Keller burst through the door before he could finish. "Enough questions." He pointed directly at Elijah. "You are being transferred downstairs." Morales frowned. "Transferred for what exactly?" Keller ignored her. "Stand up." Elijah rose slowly, gripping the leather case tightly. Keller's eyes dropped to it immediately. "Still carrying that thing around like it matters?" Elijah's voice stayed low. "It does matter." For one brief second, something uncertain crossed Keller's face. Then his phone buzzed. He glanced down at the screen and went pale for half a heartbeat before locking it immediately. Morales noticed. So did Elijah. Keller shoved the phone back into his pocket too quickly. "Move," he snapped. But as Elijah stepped toward the hallway, the airport system monitor behind Morales flashed another yellow warning across the screen. Federal Review Access requested. And this time, someone else upstairs had just approved it. The yellow warning still glowed across the airport monitor when Officer Ryan Keller grabbed Elijah Brooks by the arm and marched him through the lower security corridor like a criminal already judged. Travelers turned their heads as they passed. Some recognized him from the videos already spreading online. Others only saw an older black man in a wrinkled gray coat being escorted by armed airport police. That alone was enough for them. "That is him," a woman whispered near the escalator. "The guy who fought the cop." Elijah kept walking without answering. His leather case remained clutched tightly against his chest. Keller noticed it every few seconds. So did everyone else. The corridor opened into the airport security processing area. Bright white lights. Glass walls. Surveillance cameras mounted in every corner. Uniformed officers stood near polished metal desks while airport executives in dark suits whispered behind tablets. The whole room smelled like coffee and cold air conditioning. Elijah looked exhausted inside it. Older shoes. Frayed cuffs. One sleeve stained from coffee spilled during the takedown. Keller shoved paperwork onto the counter. Temporary detention pending federal verification. An airport attorney glanced up. "Federal?" Keller answered too quickly. "Probably fake credentials." Elijah finally spoke. Then verify them correctly. Keller smirked. You really love giving orders for somebody in cuffs. Nearby officers laughed quietly. One younger deputy looked uncertain, but lowered his eyes when Keller noticed him watching. A television mounted above the waiting area suddenly replayed cell phone footage from gate C12. The video showed Elijah hitting the marble floor while passengers gasped. But the clip started after Keller had already grabbed him. The beginning was missing. See? Keller pointed at the screen. Aggressive behavior. Elijah stared at the footage without blinking. Incomplete footage becomes convenient truth. A silence followed that line longer than anyone expected. The airport attorney frowned slightly. Keller interrupted before questions could start. This man attempted to interfere with airport security operations. By carrying legal documents? Elijah asked calmly. Keller leaned closer. By acting like the rules do not apply to him. Across the room, TSA Supervisor Linda Morales quietly opened a terminal screen again. The yellow federal warning had expanded into a restricted access request. Another line now blinked beneath it. Prior case review authority detected. Morales stared at it carefully. Before she could say anything, the system locked automatically. Access denied. Keller noticed her expression immediately. Problem? He asked sharply. System glitch, Morales answered, though her voice lacked confidence. Elijah watched her reflection in the glass wall instead of the screen itself. That tiny detail did not go unnoticed by the younger deputy nearby. Something about Elijah's calm observation unsettled him. A teenage airport volunteer entered carrying bottled water for detained passengers. Same boy from the gate. Same crooked debate badge. He handed Elijah a bottle carefully. Sir, he whispered, I think they cut the first part of the video. Keller snapped instantly. You want to lose your volunteer clearance too? The boy stepped back in fear. Elijah spoke quietly without looking up. Thank you for telling the truth anyway. The room fell awkwardly silent again. Keller hated silence now. He pointed toward Elijah's leather case. Open it. Elijah tightened his grip slightly. Those files are protected. Not anymore. Keller reached for the case, but Elijah turned it just enough to stop him without force. Smooth. Controlled. Almost procedural. The younger deputy noticed that too. Most detainees panicked. Elijah behaved like a man who understood process better than the officers around him. Keller's phone buzzed again. He stepped aside to answer. Yeah. His expression darkened almost immediately. No. Keep internal affairs out of this for now. Elijah heard every word. So did Morales. Keller turned back furious now, embarrassed that anyone had heard him. You think you are special, he barked. You are just another man hiding behind paperwork. Elijah looked directly at him. Paperwork is what keeps power accountable. No one laughed this time. The airport attorney slowly lowered his tablet. The younger deputy glanced toward Keller's bodycam footage request screen still loading in the background. 32% recovered. Then 33. Tiny hope flickered across Morales's face before another officer hurried into the room. Sir, he said nervously to Keller, airport administration wants him brought back upstairs. Keller frowned hard. Why? Someone from Federal Review requested visual confirmation. The room shifted slightly after those words. Tiny movements. Nervous glances. Phones lowering. Elijah stayed silent. Keller forced a laugh. Fine. Let them see him. He grabbed Elijah's arm again harder than before. Maybe this time everybody learns you are not important. As they reached the elevator, the younger deputy quietly slipped something beneath Elijah's leather case without Keller noticing. A printed screenshot. One frozen frame from the missing airport footage. Elijah glanced down briefly. His eyes sharpened for the first time all night. In the blurred image, Keller's hand could clearly be seen reaching for Elijah before any resistance happened. Then the elevator doors opened. And upstairs, Gate C12 was already filling with a larger crowd waiting to watch what happened next. The elevator doors opened straight into Gate C12 again, and the crowd reacted before Elijah Brooks even stepped out. Phones rose instantly. Whispering spread across the terminal like static electricity. Some passengers recognized him from the viral clips already flooding social media. Others only saw an older black man in cuffs being escorted by armed airport police beneath bright departure screens. Officer Ryan Keller walked beside him with visible confidence now, shoulders back, badge shining under terminal lights. "Everybody clear the area," Keller barked. "Federal security matter." That phrase alone made people step away. Elijah noticed it. Power did not always need truth. Sometimes it only needed volume. The teenage airport volunteer stood near the gate windows clutching his debate badge nervously. Morales remained behind the security counter, eyes fixed on the system monitor still flickering with restricted access warnings. Keller shoved Elijah toward a chair near the gate desk. "Sit." Elijah remained standing. Calm. Controlled. "You are violating chain of custody procedure by moving sealed review materials without documentation." Several nearby officers looked up immediately at the precision of the statement. Keller laughed too loudly. "Listen to him." He turned toward the crowd again. "Now he thinks he runs the airport." But Morales frowned. The younger deputy from downstairs quietly whispered to another officer, "That actually is procedure." Keller heard him. "Then maybe you should transfer to a courthouse instead of working security." Silence dropped hard after that. The younger deputy looked away immediately. Elijah slowly placed the leather case on the gate counter himself. Not defensive. Careful. Like the contents mattered beyond personal fear. Keller grabbed the case anyway and started pulling folders out aggressively. Legal notes. Review documents. Case summaries covered in handwritten annotations. One passenger muttered, "Why would somebody like him carry federal files?" Keller heard that too. "Because people fake authority every day." Elijah's eyes sharpened slightly. "People abuse authority every day too." The crowd reacted differently to that line. A few phones lowered. One older woman near the boarding lane crossed her arms and stared harder at Keller instead of Elijah. Morales suddenly leaned closer to her monitor. "Officer Keller," he ignored her completely. "You know what your problem is?" he snapped at Elijah. "You talk like you are above consequences." Elijah answered quietly. "No. I talk like someone who understands them." Another silence. Longer this time. Then Keller yanked open a side compartment inside the leather case. A silver credential slid halfway out before stopping against the counter edge. Several people nearby saw the federal seal before Keller slammed his hand over it instantly. Too fast. Too defensive. Morales noticed. The younger deputy noticed. So did the teenage volunteer. Keller forced a smirk. Cheap prop. Elijah looked directly at the hidden credential beneath Keller's hand. "You should not touch federal identification without cause." "You keep saying federal like it scares me." Keller leaned closer. "You are still in cuffs." Elijah's expression never changed. "And your body cam is still recording." That landed differently. Keller's smile weakened for the first time. Tiny. Barely visible. But enough. Morales quietly typed something into the airport system again. This time a partial record flashed across the screen before disappearing. "Review panel access, Eastern District." The line vanished almost instantly after appearing. But the airport attorney standing nearby had already seen it. He looked at Elijah differently now. Not with sympathy. With caution. A little girl sitting beside her mother pointed innocently toward Elijah's leather case. "Mom," she whispered too loudly, "why are the police scared of his papers?" The mother hushed her immediately. But the question hung in the air anyway. Keller's jaw tightened. "Enough." He pointed toward the security officers near the hallway. "Move everybody back." Then he turned toward Elijah again. "You created this scene. You wanted attention." Elijah finally sat down slowly. Exhaustion showed now beneath the calm. "No," he said quietly. "I wanted procedure." Morales looked up sharply at that word. Procedure. Not innocence. Not mercy. Procedure. The airport attorney stepped closer. "Officer Keller, maybe we should pause until federal verification clears." Keller snapped back instantly. "There is nothing to verify." But his voice cracked slightly this time. Tiny. Human. Nervous. The younger deputy suddenly cleared his throat. "Sir, the recovered footage upstairs only starts after physical contact." Keller turned cold immediately. "Are you questioning my report?" The deputy froze. "No, sir." Fear swallowed the moment alive. Keller grabbed the leather case again and pulled out one final folder. A name partially appeared across the top page before he slammed it shut. "Chief Review," he stopped too late. Morales saw it clearly. So did the airport attorney. Keller realized it 1 second afterward. His hand tightened visibly around the folder. Elijah watched him carefully now. Silent. Almost sad. Then the terminal speakers crackled overhead. "Attention Gate C-12. Federal Review representative has arrived on site." The crowd shifted instantly. Keller's face lost color for half a second. And across the terminal entrance, a dark-suited official stepped through the crowd holding a sealed authorization envelope while staring directly at Elijah Brooks. The entire terminal watched the federal representative walk toward Gate C-12 with measured steps, polished shoes echoing across the marble floor. Officer Ryan Keller reacted instantly. Too instantly. "Nobody touches those files," he snapped, stepping between the man and Elijah Brooks. "This area is under Airport Security Authority." The representative stopped calmly. Mid-50s. Gray suit. No raised voice. Just a sealed envelope in one hand and a federal credential in the other. "Then you should know better than to interfere with judicial review material." The crowd shifted hard at the word judicial. Phones lifted higher again. Keller laughed sharply, forcing confidence back into the room. "Anybody can wave a badge." Elijah remained seated beside the gate counter, cuffs still tight around his wrists. Tired eyes. Quiet breathing. But his posture never folded. Morales glanced nervously between them. The airport attorney slowly stepped closer. "Officer Keller," he said carefully, "maybe we should verify chain of command before escalating further." Keller spun toward him immediately. "Escalating?" He pointed at Elijah. This man disrupted airport operations, resisted questioning, and carried restricted federal files through a civilian checkpoint. Elijah finally spoke. "I asked for a warrant." Silence. Short. Sharp. Keller cut over him instantly. "You refused compliance." "I refused unlawful access." The younger deputy near the escalator lowered his eyes again. Several passengers exchanged uncertain looks now. The certainty in the room had started cracking. Keller noticed it too. That made him angrier. "You think using legal language makes you important," he snapped. "You are still detained." Elijah looked at the bodycam attached to Keller's vest for 1 second too long. "Then your report should match your footage." Another silence. Keller stepped forward aggressively. "You do not tell me how to do my job." The federal representative opened the sealed envelope slowly. Actually, he said calmly, someone does. Keller's jaw tightened immediately. But before the man could continue, Keller grabbed the leather case off the counter again and slammed it shut. These documents are evidence now. Morales looked startled. Sir, you cannot seize sealed Federal Review files without, I said, lock the system. Keller barked the order so loudly nearby travelers flinched. Morales froze. The airport attorney frowned harder now. Officer Keller, that is not standard airport authority. Keller pointed toward the security monitors. Then write your complaint later. The teenage volunteer suddenly stepped forward before fear could stop him. Sir, he never resisted. Keller turned cold instantly. What did you say? The teenager swallowed hard. I saw it. He asked for legal counsel before you tackled him. Several nearby passengers immediately looked at the boy. Keller stepped toward him slowly. You want your airport clearance revoked before college applications? The boy went silent immediately. His hands trembled around the debate badge clipped to his hoodie. Elijah noticed. Do not punish him for telling the truth. Keller snapped back without even looking at Elijah. Truth? He pointed toward the viral videos spreading across phones nearby. Truth is what people saw. Elijah answered quietly. No. Truth is what happened before recording started. That line landed harder than Keller expected. Even the crowd felt it. Morales glanced back toward the monitor again. A blinking notification had appeared in the corner of the security system. Archived footage recovery available. Keller saw it too. His face changed instantly. Tiny. Fast. But visible. He moved toward the console immediately. Disable external playback. Morales hesitated. Sir, that is a direct order. The federal representative stepped forward again. On whose authority? Keller ignored him completely. He leaned across the desk and manually shut down one of the monitors himself. Gasps moved softly through the terminal. One older passenger muttered, why would he shut it off if he is right? Keller heard that. His composure cracked further. Because civilians do not understand active investigations. Elijah slowly stood despite the cuffs. Then explain why the original footage was separated from your report. The room froze again. Keller stared at him now with open hostility. You think you are smarter than every officer here? Elijah answered calmly. No. I think procedure exists for moments exactly like this. The federal representative looked directly at Keller. Officer, step away from the system. Keller did not move. Instead, he grabbed the leather case tighter. Too tight. One folder bent open slightly inside it. A partial page became visible beneath the fluorescent lights. Eastern Circuit Police Review Panel, Active Chair Authorization. Morales saw it. The airport attorney saw it. Even the younger deputy caught enough words to stop breathing for a second. Keller realized too late that the page was exposed. He slammed it closed instantly. But the damage was already done. The federal representative's expression changed completely now. Not confusion anymore. Recognition. Then the security monitor behind Morales flickered back to life by itself. A loading bar crawled slowly across the screen beneath one line of text. Original bodycam footage restoring. And for the first time all night, Ryan Keller looked genuinely afraid. The loading bar crawled across the security monitor one slow inch at a time. Every sound inside Terminal C seemed to shrink around it. Officer Ryan Keller stood frozen beside the console, one hand still gripping Elijah Brooks's leather case too tightly. The younger deputy near the escalator swallowed hard. Morales stared at the screen without blinking. Original footage recovery initiated, the system repeated in a cold automated voice. Several passengers immediately lifted their phones higher again. Keller snapped toward them. "Stop recording." Nobody moved this time. Elijah remained calm despite the cuffs around his wrists. His breathing stayed even. But his eyes locked onto the monitor like he already knew what it would show. That scared Keller more than the footage itself. "This proves nothing," Keller barked suddenly. "Recovered files can be corrupted." The federal representative stepped closer to the screen. "Then you should not be nervous." A few people in the crowd exchanged looks. The confidence in Keller's voice was starting to collapse around the edges. Morales quietly reached toward the keyboard. "Sir, there is a protected judicial archive tag attached to the footage." Keller turned instantly. "Do not touch that. Too fast. Too sharp." The airport attorney noticed immediately. So did Elijah. A new line appeared across the monitor. "Authorized review access required." Then another line flashed beneath it for less than a second. "Eastern Circuit Oversight Division." The younger deputy whispered before he could stop himself. "Oversight?" Keller shot him a glare so cold the deputy stepped backward. "You saw nothing." Elijah finally spoke again. "Quiet. Controlled. That body cam was never supposed to disappear." Silence hit harder this time. Even the rolling suitcases nearby seemed quieter. Morales looked at Elijah differently now. Not with pity anymore. With suspicion. Careful suspicion. Keller forced a laugh that sounded thinner than before. "You keep talking like you know procedure." Elijah answered without raising his voice. "You violated chain of custody the moment you touched sealed review evidence." The airport attorney slowly turned toward Keller. "Is that true?" "No," Keller snapped immediately. "He is bluffing." But his hand tightened harder around the leather case. Too hard. A second folder slipped halfway out this time. A silver seal became visible beneath the fluorescent lights. "Federal Judicial Conduct Review Panel." Morales stopped breathing for a second. The teenage volunteer near the gate recognized it too. "I saw that seal before," he whispered nervously. Keller lunged instantly and shoved the folder back inside the case. Enough. The movement drew even more attention now. Phones tilted closer. A woman near the coffee stand muttered softly, "If he is lying, why hide the papers?" Keller pointed toward airport security officers gathering nearby. "Remove everybody from this gate." Nobody moved yet. Not even security. The federal representative extended his credential calmly. "This terminal is now part of a federal review matter." That sentence changed the air completely. The crowd quieted. Morales glanced back at Elijah again. This time longer. Then she noticed something half visible near Elijah's cuffed wrist. A worn leather card holder beneath his coat sleeve. Old. Scratched. Official. Elijah saw her looking but did not pull away. "You already know what this is," he said quietly. Morales hesitated. "Maybe." Keller cut in immediately. "Do not answer him." The screen suddenly flickered again. A frozen frame from the recovered body cam appeared for barely 1 second before freezing. Elijah standing still near the checkpoint. Hands visible. No aggression. No resistance. Then static. The crowd reacted immediately. "Wait," someone whispered. He was not fighting. Keller slammed his palm against the console. "The clip is incomplete." "Because somebody interrupted the recording," Elijah answered calmly. The federal representative slowly turned toward Keller now. "Did you manually disable an active body cam?" Keller's face lost color for the first time. Real color. Real fear. "If you were standing in that terminal watching that monitor flicker back to life, what would you think Officer Keller was truly afraid of?" Morales carefully reached into Elijah's leather case before Keller could stop her. She pulled out a folded document sealed with federal markings. Keller stepped forward instantly. "Do not open that." Too late. The top page unfolded halfway under the terminal lights. A printed authorization code. Judicial review access. A partially hidden title beneath it. Active federal case evaluator. The crowd went dead silent again. But before anyone could read further, the monitor suddenly flashed red. File interruption detected. Access restricted by command authority. Keller looked at the warning and immediately understood something nobody else did yet. The footage had not failed by accident. Someone with direct authority had cut it off manually. The teenage volunteer's phone vibrated in his hand. He looked down at the screen. Then slowly back up at Elijah. His face drained completely. "Sir," he whispered shakily. "I think somebody just sent me the missing clip." The teenage volunteer stared down at his shaking phone like it had suddenly become dangerous to hold. Around him, Terminal C stayed frozen beneath the fluorescent lights. Officer Ryan Keller took one sharp step forward. "Give me that phone." The boy instinctively backed away. Elijah Brooks noticed immediately. Even with cuffs still tight around his wrists, he shifted slightly between Keller and the teenager. Small movement. Quiet movement. Protective movement. "He is a witness," Elijah said calmly. Keller pointed hard at the boy. "He is interfering with an active security investigation." "No," Elijah answered softly. "He is scared." That landed harder than shouting ever could. The boy looked up at Elijah with wide eyes. For a second, the entire terminal felt too quiet. Morales carefully took the phone instead before Keller could grab it. Her eyes moved across the screen. Then stopped. "This clip was sent from an internal airport archive number," she whispered. Keller's face tightened instantly. "Delete it." "Why?" Morales asked before she could stop herself. The question hung in the air like broken glass. Keller stepped closer. "Because chain of custody has already been compromised." Elijah lowered his eyes briefly at those words. Something old moved behind his expression now. Tired. Familiar. The federal representative noticed it. "This has happened before," he said quietly. Elijah did not answer immediately. Instead, he slowly sat back down beside the gate counter. The cuffs scraped softly against the metal chair. His shoulders looked heavier suddenly. Not weak. Just tired in a way that did not start tonight. Morales glanced at the worn leather card holder still half visible beneath Elijah's coat sleeve. Old stitching. Years of use. One corner burned slightly dark. "You carried that through all of this?" she asked carefully. Elijah looked down at it for a long moment before answering. "Some things survive because they have to." Another silence. Softer this time. The airport attorney quietly stepped away to make a phone call. Keller immediately noticed. "Nobody calls anyone until this is resolved." The attorney stopped walking and turned slowly. "I think that decision left your hands 20 minutes ago." A few people nearby lowered their phones now. Not because the drama ended. Because something about Elijah no longer looked like the story they thought they were filming. The teenage volunteer finally spoke again. "Sir. I remember your face." Keller snapped immediately. "Enough." But the boy kept looking at Elijah instead. 3 years ago. My civics team visited federal court in D.C. Elijah's jaw tightened almost invisibly. Tiny reaction. But Morales caught it. "You gave a speech about constitutional searches," the boy whispered. Keller barked out a laugh too quickly. "That is impossible." The boy shook his head nervously. "No, sir. I remember because my dad was stopped illegally once." Elijah looked away after hearing that. Toward the dark airport windows. Toward his own reflection staring back. Did he ever get justice? He asked quietly. The boy swallowed hard. No, that answer seemed to hit Elijah deeper than the cuffs ever did. He reached slowly into his coat pocket with restrained movements. Keller immediately tensed. Do not move. Elijah ignored the panic in Keller's voice and carefully removed a folded photograph instead. Old. Worn at the edges. A younger Elijah standing beside an older black man in courthouse robes. Both smiling quietly. The younger deputy near the escalator frowned. Who is that? Elijah studied the photo for a second before answering. My father. Morales looked closer. There was a handwritten note across the bottom corner. Integrity matters most when nobody is watching. Keller's eyes locked onto the signature beneath it. Real fear flashed there now. Fast. Hidden. But real. Elijah folded the photo carefully again. He spent 30 years reviewing abuse cases, he said softly. Every officer hated when his name appeared on their file. Nobody laughed this time. Nobody moved either. The federal representative looked at Elijah differently now. Almost respectfully. You never told them. Elijah gave a tired smile without warmth. People who want truth usually ask before they tackle someone. Emotional silence rolled through the terminal again. Even Morales looked ashamed now. Then Keller's phone suddenly rang. Loud. Sharp. He glanced at the screen and immediately stepped away from the crowd to answer. But everyone nearby still heard enough. Sir, I can explain. Pause. His face drained further. No, the footage is incomplete. Another pause. Longer this time. Then, I did not know he was connected to the panel. Elijah slowly closed his eyes after hearing that word. Connected. Not innocent. Not mistaken. Connected. The federal representative heard it too. So did Morales. Keller turned around slowly after ending the call. Sweat visible now near his collar despite the cold terminal air. Then Morales looked back down at the recovered clip on the phone. The paused frame had advanced by 1 second. Just enough to reveal Elijah standing calmly beside the checkpoint while Keller reached first. Her breathing caught immediately. Wait, she whispered. He never touched you. Keller lunged toward the phone again. But before he could reach it, a new airport announcement echoed across Terminal C. Judge Elijah Brooks, please report to Federal Review Conference Room immediately. And this time, the entire terminal went completely silent. The airport announcement still echoed faintly through Terminal C when Officer Ryan Keller finally snapped back into motion. Nobody moves him, he barked. This situation is not verified. But the damage had already spread across the room. Judge Elijah Brooks. People were whispering it now. Quietly. Carefully. Like they were afraid to say it too loudly. Keller pointed toward Morales immediately. Shut down every active monitor. Morales hesitated for half a second too long. Keller saw it. That is a direct order. The monitors flickered dark one by one across the terminal wall. Groans moved softly through the crowd as screens went black. The recovered footage vanished again. Keller turned back toward the passengers fast, reclaiming his voice before panic could fully take him. This individual misrepresented himself during a security stop, he announced loudly. Federal affiliation does not excuse suspicious behavior. Some people nodded immediately. Uniforms still carried weight. Badges still controlled rooms. Elijah remained seated beside the gate counter, cuffs tight against his wrists, eyes steady despite the chaos around him. He looked tired now more than angry. That somehow made the scene heavier. Keller stepped closer again. You could have identified yourself from the beginning. Elijah answered quietly. You never asked. A few people lowered their phones after hearing that. But Keller cut over the silence immediately. Because normal travelers comply before creating disruption. The federal representative tried stepping forward again. Officer Keller, no, Keller snapped sharply. Until federal verification clears, he stays detained. False confidence flooded back into his voice now. He needed the crowd to believe he still controlled this terminal. And for a moment, it worked. Security officers repositioned themselves near Elijah again. The younger deputy avoided eye contact completely. Morales looked trapped between protocol and conscience. The airport attorney quietly whispered into his phone near the coffee stand, but nobody could hear what he was saying. Keller saw uncertainty spreading and attacked harder. You think one announcement changes facts, he demanded loudly toward Elijah. People fake titles every day. Then check the records, Elijah replied. The records are restricted, Keller fired back instantly. Too instantly. The federal representative caught it immediately. So did Morales. Another clue. Another crack. But Keller kept pushing forward before anyone could hold on to it. This man interfered with airport security operations, resisted lawful commands, and attempted to intimidate officers using legal jargon. Legal jargon? Elijah repeated softly. You mean constitutional procedure? A nervous laugh escaped somewhere in the crowd before dying instantly. Keller pointed directly at Elijah now. You are not in a courtroom here. Elijah looked around the terminal slowly. At the cameras. The uniforms. The frightened witnesses. That is exactly the problem. Silence hit again. Sharp enough to hurt. For 1 second even Keller seemed affected by it. Then the teenage volunteer took a small step forward. Sir, the missing clip, Keller spun immediately. One more word and airport security will confiscate your phone. The boy froze. Fear won again. Nearby passengers looked away instead of helping. Public pressure moved exactly where Keller wanted it. An older businessman muttered quietly, if he really was important, this would already be resolved. Keller heard that and grabbed onto it immediately. Exactly. He gestured toward Elijah with forced confidence. Real federal officials do not sit around in handcuffs at airport gates. Elijah lowered his eyes briefly at that line. Not humiliation. Exhaustion. Like he had heard versions of it his entire life. Morales noticed his hands then. Calm despite the cuffs. Controlled despite the pressure. That detail bothered her more than shouting would have. A small alert suddenly blinked across the darkened monitor nearest the security desk. System archives sync incomplete. Keller saw it first. His face tightened instantly. He moved fast and unplugged the monitor completely before anyone else could read further. Too fast again. Too nervous again. The federal representative watched carefully now. You seem very concerned about unfinished footage. Keller forced another laugh. I am concerned about misinformation. Elijah quietly looked toward the unplugged screen. Truth survives longer than panic. That line settled heavily into the room. A few passengers who had been recording earlier slowly lowered their phones now. Not because they believed Keller. Because they no longer knew who to believe. Then a new obstacle hit hard. 2 more airport security supervisors entered Terminal C from the escalator corridor. Keller straightened immediately. Authority reinforced authority. Finally, he said loudly. Escort him to holding. One supervisor looked uncertain after noticing the federal representative nearby. Sir, there are calls coming from D. C. Keller cut him off fast. Not until identity verification completes. Then he stepped closer to Elijah one final time. Quiet enough that only nearby people heard him. You should have stayed anonymous. Elijah met his eyes calmly for the first time in minutes. You should have followed procedure. Keller's jaw tightened hard. He grabbed Elijah's arm and pulled him toward the center aisle between the gates where the entire terminal could see him clearly now. Public humiliation. Final control. Final pressure. Passengers stepped backward as cameras lifted again. Then, just as security reached for Elijah's shoulder, Morales looked down at the teenage volunteer's phone one more time. The recovered clip had advanced by another frame on its own. This time the paused image showed Keller reaching toward Elijah first while Elijah's hands remained visible and lowered at his sides. Morales slowly looked up, her face draining pale. And before she could stop herself, she whispered loud enough for nearby people to hear, "Officer. Why does the footage show you starting the confrontation?" Morales's question hung in the middle of Terminal C like a crack through glass. "Officer, why does the footage show you starting the confrontation?" Nobody answered immediately. Officer Ryan Keller stared at her with open warning in his eyes. Then he forced a cold laugh that sounded too rehearsed now. Because partial footage creates false narratives. He turned sharply toward the gathering crowd before anyone else could speak. This is exactly why civilians should not interfere in security operations. But the room no longer moved with him the same way. Doubt had entered. And doubt changes crowds fast. Keller felt it immediately. So he escalated harder. "Escort him out," he ordered the security supervisors. "Now." The supervisors hesitated only a second before moving toward Elijah Brooks again. One grabbed his arm. Another reached for the leather case. Elijah winced slightly as the cuffs tightened when they pulled him upright. Tiny reaction. Real pain. But he still did not resist. "You are making a mistake," Morales whispered. Keller spun toward her instantly. "No. I am containing one." Then he pointed directly at Elijah in front of everyone. This man used false federal association to intimidate officers, interfere with airport procedures, and manipulate witnesses. Several travelers backed away again after hearing that. Uniforms still carried fear. One woman quietly lowered her phone and whispered, "Maybe we should stay out of it." Keller heard that and pushed further. "Exactly." He stepped closer to Elijah. "People like you rely on confusion." Elijah looked directly at him for the first time since the confrontation started. Calm eyes. Exhausted eyes. "No," he said quietly. "People like you rely on nobody asking questions." The line landed hard enough to silence half the terminal again. Keller's jaw flexed. "You do not belong in this investigation." "Neither does panic," Elijah answered. Keller snapped immediately. "Enough." He grabbed the leather case from Morales and yanked it open aggressively in front of everyone. Papers spilled partly onto the counter. Federal seals. Legal forms. Review codes. Most passengers could not understand them. But they looked important enough to deepen the tension. Keller held up one page triumphantly. "Look at this." He waved it toward the crowd. No official identification photo attached. No active courtroom assignment listed. The airport attorney frowned immediately after seeing the document. "That is not a standard personnel file." Keller ignored him completely. "Because it is incomplete." He looked directly at Elijah now. "You came here hiding something." Another emotional spike hit the room. Phones lifted again. The younger deputy looked trapped between fear and conscience. Morales stared at the scattered papers and suddenly noticed something else. A line across the bottom corner of one form. Active Police Conduct Review Authority. Her breathing slowed. Keller noticed her noticing. He slammed the folder shut immediately. Too late again. "Stop reading over my shoulder," he barked. The teenage volunteer tightened his grip on the phone, still holding the recovered clip. "Sir, if the footage keeps restoring, delete it. Keller's voice exploded through the terminal so loudly nearby passengers flinched. Right now. The boy froze again. Elijah turned slightly toward him despite the guards holding his arms. "Do not be afraid of evidence," he said softly. Keller laughed bitterly. "Evidence?" He leaned close enough for only nearby people to hear. "Nobody here is going to protect you." That line changed the room again. Cruel. Personal. Too personal. Even one of the security supervisors loosened his grip slightly afterward. Then a tiny microhope appeared. The dark security monitor near the gate suddenly flickered back on by itself. Static first. Then one frozen frame from the bodycam footage. Elijah standing still beside the checkpoint scanner. Keller lunging forward first. Audible murmurs spread immediately through the crowd. "Wait, that officer touched him first, why would they hide that?" Keller reacted instantly. He crossed the floor fast and ripped the monitor cable directly from the wall. The screen died again. Gasps followed immediately. "Technical malfunction," Keller barked without turning around. Nobody believed him anymore. But fear still controlled the room enough to keep people quiet. Keller straightened his uniform slowly, reclaiming authority by force now instead of confidence. "This matter is closed." He pointed toward the security exit corridor. "Remove him from public view." The supervisors pulled Elijah forward again. Harder this time. The crowd parted silently as he walked between them in cuffs. Humiliation at full weight now. Public. Recorded. Controlled. Elijah's leather card holder slipped halfway from his coat pocket during the movement. One of the supervisors noticed the federal seal stamped faintly across its edge and hesitated for half a second. Keller saw it immediately and shoved the card holder back inside Elijah's coat before anyone else could read it. "Keep moving." The airport attorney suddenly stepped forward again. "Officer Keller, if this turns out to be a judicial interference matter, it will not," Keller snapped too quickly. Then he said the wrong thing. The review panel was never supposed to reach this airport anyway. Silence. Dead silence. Morales looked up instantly. The federal representative slowly narrowed his eyes. Even the younger deputy stared now. Keller realized too late what he had just admitted. Before anyone could respond, the doors near the private federal corridor suddenly opened behind the crowd. Heavy footsteps echoed across the marble floor. Then a calm voice cut clean through the terminal. "Stop right there." And every head in Terminal C turned at once. The entire terminal froze at the sound of that voice. Even the rolling suitcase wheels seemed to stop. The federal corridor doors stood open behind the crowd, bright white security lights spilling across the polished airport floor. A tall woman in a dark navy overcoat stepped forward beside two federal marshals. No raised voice. No dramatic rush. Just calm authority powerful enough to cut through panic instantly. Officer Keller straightened immediately. "This is a secured airport matter," he snapped before she even reached them. "Federal Review can request records later." The woman ignored him completely at first. Her eyes moved directly to Elijah Brooks standing in cuffs between two security officers. She noticed the bruised wrist. The damaged leather case. The scattered legal papers on the floor. Then her gaze shifted slowly toward the unplugged monitor beside gate C14. Silence deepened. "Reconnect the screen," she said quietly. One of the airport supervisors obeyed before Keller could object. That changed everything. Keller stepped forward fast. "Ma'am, this individual interfered with airport security operations and falsely implied federal authority." The woman finally looked at him. Calm. Sharp. Dangerous. "Then the footage will support your statement." Nobody moved after that. The crowd began lowering phones one by one now. Not because the tension disappeared. Because it suddenly became serious in a different way. The younger deputy swallowed hard beside the checkpoint desk. Morales slowly stepped back from Keller without realizing she had done it. The monitor flickered alive again. Static. Audio distortion. Then frozen body cam footage reappeared. Elijah standing beside the scanner. Keller approaching aggressively first. Audible whispers spread through the terminal immediately. That is not what he said happened, look at the timestamp, why did they stop the video before? Keller pointed sharply toward the monitor. Partial footage proves nothing. But this time his voice cracked slightly at the end. Tiny fracture. Visible. Elijah remained silent. Shoulders tired. Eyes steady. One marshal noticed the cuffs cutting into his skin and looked toward the woman in the overcoat. She gave the smallest nod. The cuffs loosened slightly but stayed on. Not freedom. Not yet. Then another clue surfaced. The airport attorney carefully picked up one of the fallen papers near the counter and frowned harder than before. This docket code, he whispered. I know this seal. Keller turned immediately. Put that down. Too fast again. Too nervous. The attorney ignored him now. Why would a police conduct review authorization be attached to a traveler profile? Nobody answered. The question hung there heavily. Elijah finally spoke, quiet enough that the silence had to lean toward him. Because some cases do not stay inside courtrooms. Another emotional spike hit the room instantly. Keller laughed again, but weaker this time. You people hear one vague sentence and suddenly think there is a conspiracy. Then explain the deleted footage, Morales said suddenly. Everyone looked at her. Even she seemed shocked. She finally spoke out loud. Keller stared at her with disbelief. Betrayal. Officer Morales, he warned. Careful. But she did not back away this time. The body cam log shows interruptions before the tackle. More whispers spread through the crowd. The teenage volunteer stepped closer, nervously holding his phone. I backed up part of the clip before the system reset. Keller moved toward him instantly. That device is evidence now. Elijah lifted his head slightly. No, he said calmly. It is memory. Silence again. Deep silence. If you were standing in that terminal, who do you think would panic first once the full truth appeared on that screen? The question seemed to float naturally through the tension itself. The woman in the overcoat extended her hand toward the teenager. Give me the phone. Keller stepped between them immediately. You cannot accept unauthorized evidence from civilians. I can, she answered softly, if federal procedure allows it. That word hit him visibly. Procedure. Elijah watched Keller carefully after that. Not with anger. With recognition. Like he already understood exactly which rule Keller feared most. Then the monitor suddenly advanced another few seconds on its own. Audio crackled loudly through the terminal speakers now. Keller's voice echoed from the recording. Grab him before he gets to the gate. The entire terminal reacted at once. Gasps. Silence. A woman lowered her coffee cup slowly without taking her eyes off the screen. One security guard stepped backward. Another looked directly at Keller for the first time with uncertainty instead of loyalty. Keller lunged toward the monitor again. Turn it off. One marshal blocked him immediately. Not aggressively. Just enough. That tiny gesture changed the entire power balance in the room. Keller froze. The woman in the overcoat finally took the leather card holder from the counter where it had partly slipped open during the struggle. Inside was a federal identification card turned face down. She stared at it for 2 long seconds before slowly placing it on the desk in front of everyone. Nobody breathed. The airport attorney opened the damaged file beside it. One page remained folded shut beneath the others. Official seal visible across the edge. The system terminal near gate C14 suddenly flashed a restricted access notification. Access verified. User status pending confirmation. Keller's face lost color instantly. The woman looked toward the screen. Then toward Elijah. Then back toward the crowd gathering around the checkpoint. Finally she spoke 4 words that made the entire terminal fall completely silent. Before you judge, watch this. The footage finally played. Clear this time. No cuts. No missing seconds. The airport terminal stood frozen under the cold white light as Keller's voice echoed through the speakers again. Grab him before he gets to the gate. Then came the second line. Worse than the first. Nobody important looks like that. A sharp breath moved through the crowd. One woman near the coffee stand lowered her phone completely. The teenage volunteer stared at Keller in disbelief. Morales looked down at the floor like she already knew her career had split into a before and after. Elijah Brooks remained still beside the counter. Shoulders tired. Wrists red from the cuffs. But for the first time since the tackle, nobody looked at him like a suspect anymore. The woman in the navy overcoat stepped toward the monitor and tapped the frozen timestamp. Officer Keller filed his incident report 14 minutes before this altercation officially occurred. Silence. Absolute silence. Keller tried immediately. That system clock is wrong. No, the airport attorney answered quietly. It is synced through Federal Review servers. Another spike hit the room. The attorney opened the damaged leather file carefully now. Inside sat a federal judiciary credential wrapped beneath court review documents stamped with internal oversight seals. He swallowed hard before speaking again. This is authentic. Keller stepped forward fast. Anybody can fake credentials. But then the system terminal behind the gate flashed again. Access confirmed. Honorable Elijah Brooks. Federal Judicial Review Division. Even the security guard stopped breathing for a second. Phones lowered across the terminal one by one. Nobody whispered now. They only stared. Elijah finally lifted his eyes toward Keller fully. Calm. Human. Exhausted. You reviewed my clothes, he said softly. You never reviewed your own conduct. Keller's face drained white instantly. You are lying. The woman in the overcoat answered before Elijah could. He is Federal Judge Elijah Brooks. The words landed like concrete across the terminal floor. He oversees police misconduct hearings in 3 states. Morales physically stepped backward. One airport supervisor removed his own badge clip slowly, almost unconsciously, like the symbol suddenly felt heavier. Keller laughed once, desperate now. If he was a judge, why walk through the public checkpoint? Elijah answered quietly. Because ordinary people do. That silence afterward hurt more than any shout. The monitor advanced again automatically. Bodycam footage now showed Keller ignoring TSA protocol warnings before the tackle. Then another angle appeared from airport surveillance. Elijah had both hands visible the entire time. No threat. No aggression. Only confusion. The federal marshal beside the woman finally spoke. Officer Keller, you knowingly filed false escalation language against a federal judicial officer. Keller pointed toward Elijah again. He provoked this. No, Morales interrupted suddenly, voice shaking. You recognized his name first. Every eye turned toward her instantly. Keller froze. Too late. Morales continued carefully now. At the scanner, when you saw the court document, you asked if he was that Brooks. The terminal erupted into whispers again. The airport attorney stared directly at Keller now. You knew exactly who he was. Keller's mouth opened but nothing came out. Elijah closed his eyes briefly like the truth hurt him more than the humiliation itself. Then he reached slowly into the damaged leather case and removed the folded photograph from earlier. An old picture. A younger Elijah standing beside his father outside a courthouse. His father wore a janitor uniform. The photo shook slightly in Elijah's hand. "My father cleaned courtrooms for 20 years, he said quietly. He told me dignity mattered most in places where power forgets itself." Nobody moved. Nobody even looked away. The teenage volunteer wiped his eyes quickly. One TSA officer quietly removed Elijah's loosened cuffs completely without being asked. No applause followed. Only silence filled with shame. Keller tried one final time to recover control. "This is political." The woman in the overcoat turned toward him sharply now. "No. This is procedural." Another emotional spike slammed through the room. She held up a printed report beside the monitor. "You requested deletion authorization for body cam segments before filing arrest justification." Keller stared at the paper like he no longer recognized the world around him. Elijah never smiled. Never gloated. He simply rubbed his bruised wrist once and looked toward Morales instead. "You still had time to tell the truth," he said gently. Morales broke completely after that. "I was afraid," she whispered. Elijah nodded once. That is how systems stay broken. Then came the final shock. The federal marshal stepped beside Keller and removed his airport access badge slowly in front of everyone. Not violently. Not dramatically. Just officially. Cleanly. Publicly. The terminal watched in dead silence as Keller's authority disappeared inch by inch. One of the airport executives leaned toward the woman in the overcoat. "Judge Brooks oversees the Federal Review Panel examining airport force complaints next month, does he not?" She answered without hesitation. "He chairs it." Keller looked at Elijah like he had finally understood the size of the disaster around him. Not because Elijah was powerful. Because Elijah had been exactly the kind of man Keller believed nobody would defend. The woman in the overcoat handed the final evidence file toward the waiting federal attorneys approaching through the terminal doors. Then she looked directly at Keller and asked the one question he could not answer in front of the entire airport. "Officer Keller, how many other people did you assume would stay silent?" Nobody spoke after that question. The airport terminal stood in complete silence except for the low hum of the security scanners and the distant boarding announcement nobody listened to anymore. Officer Keller looked around slowly like he expected someone to rescue him. Nobody moved. Not Morales. Not the airport supervisors. Not even the security officers standing beside him minutes earlier. The federal marshal stepped forward first. "Officer Daniel Keller," he said calmly, "your airport enforcement credentials are suspended pending federal investigation." The words landed hard. Public. Official. Final. Keller shook his head immediately. "This is being twisted." "The footage twisted nothing," the airport attorney answered quietly. Another marshal removed Keller's body cam from his uniform in full view of the crowd. That small sound of the clip releasing echoed louder than shouting ever could. Several people in the terminal lowered their eyes at the same time. One woman who had recorded Elijah earlier slowly deleted the video from her phone without saying a word. Morales finally stepped toward Elijah carefully. "Judge Brooks," her voice cracked. "I should have stopped it." Elijah looked at her for a long moment. Then he answered softly, "You still can." That sentence hit harder than punishment. The woman in the navy overcoat handed a printed notice toward airport administration. "All use of force reports filed by Keller over the last 18 months will be reopened for review." A TSA supervisor visibly lost color hearing that. Another emotional spike rolled through the terminal. The teenage volunteer near gate C-14 whispered quietly, "So this happened before?" Elijah looked toward the boy gently. "Systems do not fail in one moment," he said. "They fail when silence becomes habit." Phones stayed lowered now. Nobody filmed that sentence. They simply listened. Keller tried once more to regain control. You are destroying a career over one misunderstanding. No, the airport attorney replied sharply. You destroyed your own career when you altered federal evidence. Silence again. Heavy silence. One of the federal attorneys opened the recovered report file beside the monitor. The deleted bodycam request form sat right on top now. Signed. Time-stamped. Verified. The same terminal system that once flagged Elijah as suspicious now displayed his full judicial credentials beside the federal oversight seal. Honorable Elijah Brooks, Active Review Authority. The contrast in the room felt painful. Minutes ago people avoided looking at him. Now airport staff stepped aside automatically when he moved. One older janitor near the corridor stared at Elijah with wet eyes. Elijah noticed immediately. The man wore the same faded maintenance uniform Elijah's father once wore in the old courthouse photograph. Elijah walked over quietly and picked up the fallen cleaning cart bucket someone had knocked aside during the chaos earlier. He handed it back respectfully with both hands. Thank you for your work, Elijah said softly. The janitor could not even answer at first. That moment changed the room more than the reveal itself. Morales removed the loose cuffs completely from the counter and set them down beside Keller's suspended badge. Two objects now resting side by side under the harsh terminal lights. Power and humiliation reversed without anyone raising a voice. The woman in the overcoat turned toward airport leadership. Judge Brooks requested anonymous travel clearance months ago because of ongoing police review threats. Several executives looked horrified hearing that. And still, she continued calmly, your officers treated him as dangerous based entirely on appearance. Nobody argued. They could not. Keller stared at Elijah desperately now. You could stop this. Elijah met his eyes evenly. No anger. No revenge. Just exhaustion. I asked you to follow procedure, he answered quietly. That was the moment you could have stopped this. Another emotional wave swept through the crowd. One TSA employee began quietly apologizing to Elijah under her breath. Others followed with lowered eyes. Not dramatic. Human. The airport attorney handed Elijah the damaged leather case carefully now, along with the old photograph that had slid halfway beneath the security desk during the tackle. Elijah held the photo gently, smoothing the bent corner with his thumb. The same picture his father once carried into courtrooms where nobody knew his name. The woman in the overcoat stepped beside Elijah after federal officers escorted Keller toward the secured hallway. The review board wants you back in Washington immediately, she said quietly. Elijah nodded once but did not move yet. His eyes stayed on the terminal around him. On the frightened workers. The silent witnesses. The young deputy still shaking near the scanner. Not yet, he answered softly. There are people here who still think dignity depends on a uniform. The woman studied him carefully after that. Then she handed him a new federal access card to replace the damaged one. Clean. Untouched. Restored. Elijah stared at it for a long second but did not place it in his pocket immediately. Across the terminal, the teenage volunteer looked at him with something new now. Not fear. Hope. And for the first time that entire night, Elijah realized the humiliation was over, but the wound underneath it was not. Morning light poured through the airport glass walls softer than it had the night before. The same terminal that once watched Elijah Brooks get tackled now moved differently around him. Not louder. Quieter. Respectful. Workers who had rushed past him earlier slowed down now when they crossed his path. Some nodded gently. Others lowered their eyes with quiet shame. The security checkpoint near gate C-14 had already changed overnight. A printed notice now stood beside the scanner. All USO F-Force incidents require full video review prior to detention escalation. Morales had placed it there herself before sunrise. Elijah noticed the trembling signature at the bottom. He said nothing about it. The damaged leather case rested in his hands again, repaired carefully along the torn edge. Beside it sat the old courthouse photograph of his father in the janitor uniform. No longer hidden inside paperwork. No longer treated like something embarrassing. The teenage volunteer approached slowly holding a warm coffee cup with both hands. "Sir," he said nervously, "they told me you could have pressed charges against everybody." Elijah accepted the coffee gently. "Punishment changes fear," he answered softly. "Dignity changes people." The boy smiled faintly after that. Real hope this time. Nearby, Morales finished removing Keller's nameplate from the checkpoint desk. No dramatic ceremony. Just quiet consequence. She looked exhausted when she approached Elijah again. "I submitted my full statement," she said. "Every missing report. Every altered stop." Elijah studied her carefully before nodding once. Truth still counts even when it arrives late. Her eyes filled immediately. Another emotional payoff settled through the terminal. One of the older janitors from the night before walked past pushing his cleaning cart. This time several TSA officers stepped aside automatically to let him through first. The old man looked stunned by such a small gesture. Elijah smiled gently watching it happen. That mattered more to him than headlines ever would. The woman in the navy overcoat returned carrying a thin federal folder. "Washington approved your recommendation," she said quietly. Elijah opened the file slowly. Inside was authorization for a national airport oversight training program focused on bias escalation and procedural dignity. His name appeared at the bottom beside the title founding chair. For a long moment he simply stared at the page silently. "You really want to spend more years fighting this system?" she asked softly. Elijah glanced toward the checkpoint where passengers now moved through calmer lines. "My father spent 20 years cleaning floors where people thought he did not belong," he answered. "I can spend a few more years making sure nobody gets thrown to the ground because of how they look walking across one." Another silence followed. Warm this time. Healing. The teenage volunteer suddenly spoke up from behind them. "Then people like me should help too." Elijah looked at him and smiled for the first time in the entire story. Small. Tired. Real. "Then start by noticing who gets ignored," he said. "Most injustice begins there." Across the terminal, one frightened traveler in worn work clothes hesitated near security after setting off the scanner alarm accidentally. Instantly tense. Embarrassed. Waiting to be humiliated. Several passengers already turned to stare. Elijah walked over before security could escalate anything. He picked up the man's dropped lunch bag from the floor and handed it back calmly. "Take your time," Elijah said quietly. "Nobody here needs to be afraid." The atmosphere changed immediately. One TSA officer softened his tone. Another passenger helped gather the spilled items without complaint. Tiny moment. Huge difference. Morales watched all of it from the checkpoint desk. So did the airport staff. So did the people who filmed the humiliation the night before. This time nobody raised a phone. The federal access card rested in Elijah's breast pocket now beside the old photograph of his father. One symbol of authority. One symbol of humanity. Balanced together. As boarding announcements echoed softly across the terminal, the woman in the overcoat extended her hand toward Elijah. "Judge Brooks," she said warmly, "your flight to Washington is ready." Elijah looked once more at the terminal where his dignity had been stripped away hours earlier. The same floor. The same lights. The same crowd. But now people stepped aside for him not because they feared power, but because they finally recognized humanity. He picked up the repaired leather case, nodded toward Morales and the young volunteer, then walked slowly toward the boarding gate with his head high beneath the morning light. And behind him, in a place where silence once protected abuse, kindness finally began speaking first.